Okay. We're getting a bit of a green day today. Now everyone's saying, okay, maybe the worst is over. Maybe we've reached the bottom. Maybe we're going to bounce here today. And the truth is, I do believe that there is a bounce imminent. And the only question is whether this bounce is going to take us up above a higher high and then take us above the higher high and the bull market's still intact, or whether it's going to be a relief bounce. It's going to trap us all and it's going to send us all the way back down again. Either way, I do believe that we are bottoming, but I also believe that you can't really call the bottom exactly. I think that bottoming is a process. And today I'm going to show you how many indicators, about 13 or 14 indicators that will show us whether we are near a bottom. And in fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them have already triggered. And the other 4 still have to trigger. So we're going to look at the bottom indicators. I'm going to show you when I'm going to be ready to call a bottom. And I'm going to show you, when I think we're going to bottom. Big show today, guys. Let's do this. Wakey, rise and shine. How many of you actually think the bottom is near? Let me know in the chat. In fact, let's do a poll. Theo, put a poll there. Have we seen the bottom, or is the bottom still coming? Let's see what everybody says. Guys, I'm going to show you some bottom indicators today to show us exactly when the bottom is. As I said before, I don't quite think that we're at the bottom yet. My thesis remains that we have to go under the $100,000 level for psychological reasons. But I do believe that we are very, very, very near a bottom. And we need to understand exactly how to identify when the bottom is actually here, right? Because then we know when to get in. As I say, I'm still of the opinion that we are that we're going to go one leg lower, but I'm also still of the opinion that we're still in a bull market. And so I'm going to show you where I think we're going to get a bounce, which indicators have to hit. And then the only question becomes, is that bounce going to take us above the all-time high over here? And if it doesn't take us above the all-time high, then it could be a trap that's going to get us all to think that we're going to take out the all-time high, and then it's going to take out the lows again. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, what the hell are you waiting for? You're waiting for the next bull market, right? And if you are subscribed, I see there's only 184 likes. Let's see if we can 184 likes. Yeah, let's see if we can get that number up to like 300, 400. People here are gloating, making... it's a short. Okay, well done, Andre. Well done, bro. Well done. Well done, bro. All right, so let's talk about bottoming. So what most people don't understand about bottoming is that it's a process. It doesn't happen on one day. It takes a long time. It takes a long time for bottoms to actually form. And when bottoms actually form, certain indicators start to trigger. Some of the indicators are on the charts. Some of the indicators are on chain. Some of the indicators are on sentiment. And when they all align, when the on chain, the on chart, and the on sentiment indicators align, then sometimes you can place an asymmetric bet that we're way closer to the bottom and that the risk return is actually skewed in favor of the fact that the market's actually going to go and bounce. And right now, I think that we're at exactly that spot. I don't think we've seen the bottom quite yet. I think that we have to break below the $100,000 for psychological levels. And I know people say, but we wicked down to $98. I think we have to close below the $100,000 for psychological levels. We have to shake out all those hands that are here or that are holding on and basically said, look, the $100,000 is at psychological level. If Bitcoin goes below the $100,000, I'm getting out. We have to shake out those hands. And when we do, then we're definitely going to reach a bottom. In the meantime, I am seeing the perfect synchronization. I don't know what do you call it when a lot of things come together at once? Synchronicity. Perfect synchronicity of all the bottom indicators, the on-chain, the on-chart, and the on-sentiment indicators. And they are now starting to bottom. And that is what I wanted to show you today. So let's look at the different indicators that effectively do land up calling a bottom. And I think the first one that we need to look at is the very basic chart structure. Generally, when we bottom, we follow a certain pattern in crypto. And I want to show you that pattern because that pattern is very pronounced over here. We have a very sharp drawdown, and then we have a recovery. And then about 30 days later, and I don't know if this one exactly was 30 days. If I remember correctly, this one was slightly longer. This one was about 70 days. I was there. What you do is you take out the lows, generally in a wick, and then you carry on climbing. And it's not the only time that it's happened. The same thing happened over here. The same thing happened over here. The same thing happened over here. We went down very, very fast. about, in this one it was about 30 days, so we went down very, very, very fast somewhere around here. And then about 42 days later, we went out and we swept the bottom with a wick, and then we continued to go back up. So the first thing is, in the chart structure, have we actually done that? And the answer is definitely yes. So if you look at the low that happened in the liquidation wicks, we've pretty much come back and scraped and taken out the bottom. In order for us to actually convincingly take out that bottom, I'd like to see this going to around 95 to 98,000. That way, we'll put in the same pattern that we put in over here, the same pattern that we put in all the other bottoms, right? So on that chart structure alone, I can say, well, we're almost there. We haven't actually hit the bottom when it actually comes to that. The next thing around a chart structure is, Charles says, picking the bottom. So one of my mentors once said to me, Thea, do you know what happens if you pick your bottom? You get shit on your finger, bro. You shouldn't say that on YouTube. You shouldn't say that on YouTube. Confluence, that's it. Confluence. All right, the next thing is the average drawdown in a cycle. And the question is whether we've actually hit the average drawdown in the cycle. Now, in 2017, the average drawdown in the cycle was about 34%. But why? Because we didn't have as much liquidity, and the asset was a much younger asset, and therefore the volatility was much bigger. As you can see, when we moved to 2021 and the asset was slightly more mature, the volatility became a little bit less. And as a result, the average correction was only about 27%. And that is if you include the big 55% correction that happened when Luna collapsed. And that, the big 55% correction. If you exclude that one, the average correction is about 24%. Now in this cycle, the average correction is about 23%, right? And so it makes sense that the average correction in a cycle on Bitcoin will be 34%, then maybe 23%, and then around 21%. Currently, we are at about 21%. And as you can see, we're hitting some really, really, really key levels over here, right? And so from an average drawdown point of view, I pretty much think that that indicator has actually been hit, right? So average drawdown 23%, I think that's good for us. Then we talk about sentiment, right? And remember I said to you, it's not like you're looking for confluence. Thanks for whoever gave me that word. It's James Stephen. Can you see? Just call up James Stephen's tweet there. So then what we have is we need to have a confluence between the charts, the on-chain, and the on-sentiment, right? So that was the charts that I just showed you. Now I'm going to show you a little bit around the sentiment, right? And if you look at the sentiment, what you can see in the sentiment is that when we bottom, we usually get around 5 to 6 or 7 days of sentiment staying under or near extreme fear. Now, we had 2 days of extreme fear 2 days ago. We are now back in fear. And the question is, what will the market do today? If this oscillator hovers around extreme fear, and when I say extreme fear, probably between 20 and 30, if we hover between 20 and 30 for the next 7 days, then I can say that we've again put in one of these bottoms, or one of these traditional bottoms, where you're in a bull market or you're in an up market and you reach extreme fear and panic. That lasts for about 5 to 7 days, and then you continue with another leg up. And so from a sentiment point of view, I would say that this one has almost triggered, hasn't quite triggered yet. The next thing that you need for the markets to bottom is you need a change in liquidity, because markets are driven by liquidity. In bear markets, liquidity leaves the market, and in bull markets, liquidity enters the market, right? Now, if you look at Willy Woo, who's a very renowned analyst in the space, he created this chart over here, which basically shows 2 indicators. The soft one, or the dotted one, is a leading indicator of liquidity, and the dark one is a cumulative or dot indicator of liquidity. Now, what you can see is that first, the original one, the dotted one turns. After dotted one turns, usually the liquidity actually starts turning. What you can see is that for a while now, the liquidity has actually been going down. But if you look at this indicator over here, it's showing that the liquidity has actually started to turn. For those of you who are confused about what this liquidity actually is, liquidity is all the money basically coming into Bitcoin. So like whether it comes in from the ETFs or the US or USDT, all the money basically coming into Bitcoin, that is the liquidity that's actually coming into the market. And what you can see is that this indicator has actually started to turn. And what usually follows is a pattern like this, and then we'll get the liquidity back on the rise now. So the leading indicator for liquidity has actually started to turn. So here again, what I'd say is that we've almost turned, because the leading indicator is starting to turn, but the lagging indicator hasn't yet started to turn. The next thing that we need to see for the market to bottom is we need to see the leverage ratios decrease or align or get into healthy leverage ratios. What I mean by healthy leverage ratios, because I guess when you look at the crypto market, you can kind of say there's no such thing as healthy leverage. All these leverage traders are all getting wiped out. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about the ratio of leverage between Bitcoin and altcoins, because altcoins are leverage on Bitcoin, and leverage on altcoins is leverage on leverage. And in unhealthy markets, you get a lot of leverage on leverage. And in healthy markets, or in markets that are bottomed, you get no leverage on leverage. So if you think about Bitcoin leverage, and then another layer of Bitcoin leverage, which is altcoins, and then another layer, the third layer is leverage on altcoins. So it's Bitcoin, altcoins, leverage on altcoins. And if you look at that indicator over here, what you can see is that if you look at Bitcoin, and you look at the blue and you say, when does Bitcoin usually bottom? Is when the open interest of Bitcoin usually hits about 50%. So you can see here, I've just taken like a random date here, like around the Thursday, the 8th of August, and all the way until like the 20th, or all the way up until September 20th, we probably bottomed. Remember, I said to you, bottoming is a process around this time. So let's go to August 2024 on the charts. And again, this is the first time looking at it. So August 2024. This is around here, and you can see that in those 30 days, it took Bitcoin was actually bottoming. And so basically what you can say is that when the Bitcoin open interest is equal to 50% plus of the open interest of the entire market, that means that we're usually about to bottom. So, I mean, you can kind of see it over here as well. That was Tuesday, May the 6th. So let's look at Tuesday, May the 6th. Tuesday, May the 6th. Tuesday, that is somewhere over there. Bang, bottom. Here we go, bottom. And then we landed up flying back up again. So there it is. What you can see, where are we now? We're not above 50%. We're at 47%, but we are very much on the way up. What would get that to 50% plus? Well, another little flash. And when we flash, the altcoin leverage gets destroyed much quicker than the Bitcoin leverage. So for me, again, there, I'm going to say we're almost. We've almost hit that indicator. Cool. The next one that I want to look at is the supply in loss. Now, what is that indicator? That indicator shows you the number of Bitcoin holders in total that are currently in a loss. And generally what that indicator says to us is that when 30% of holders are generally in a loss, that is usually when the market actually turns, right? Why? Because generally what that assumes is it assumes that the market tests people conviction. And when 1/3 of all Bitcoin is at a loss, generally that's the point of, that's usually a turning point. So where are we in that cycle right now? You can see that we're over 28% of Bitcoin circulating supply is almost at a loss. In general, when you look at that range of the 24 to 30, that is the range where we generally bottom in bull markets. So if we're still in a bull market, then that is the range where we generally bottom. Where are we now? We're at 28.1. So I think for that one's definitely hit, right? So that one's definitely hit. Let's look at the next one. The weekly RSI. Now we're going back to the charts. Remember I said to you, it's charts, chain, and sentiment. On charts, on chain, and sentiment. Now we're going to go back to the charts. And on the charts specifically, we're looking at the weekly time frame, and we're looking at the RSIs. And we kind of say to ourselves, well, in bull markets, when does the RSI actually bottom? And the answer is that in a bull market, the RSI generally bottoms at around 45. And in a bear market, the RSI can go way below. So of course, the RSI can go way below. You can see it went way below in 14 and 15. It went way below in 18 and 19. It went way below in 20. But generally, barring Black Swan COVID over here and barring bear markets, in a bull market, the RSI usually bounces at around 45, and that's on the weekly. Where is the RSI today? The RSI today is at 45 on the weekly. So on that one, I have to say that we've actually hit that level. Then we look at the Bollinger Bands. The Bollinger Bands are effectively the volatility bands. They measure the volatility in a bull market both to the upside and to the downside. And usually in a bull market, when the price touches and wicks just below the lower Bollinger Band, historically that's been a place where we're bouncing. And if you look at where we are today with Bitcoin, that's 23, 24. You can kind of see what this is. And again, I'm looking at a weekly over here. That is the Bollinger Band, the bottom Bollinger Band. That is the wick or the candle. And we just touched the bottom Bollinger Bands. So on that indicator, I have to say that that indicator is also triggered for us. Then we look at the bull market support band. And again, we're back on the charts, right? And the bull market support band is quite a tricky one because it's called the bull market support band, but very often in bull markets, the price of Bitcoin actually does go below the bull market support band. And generally in bull markets, it can stay there for between 60 to maybe even 120 days. Now, we have actually broken down below the bull market support band. Currently, we're sitting at about 10% below bull market, 7% below the bull market support band. And we've been down there for 27 days or so. So if history was to repeat, then here we're quite a while away from bottom. We're probably a month or two away from the actual bottom. But don't forget, in this process, we also have to turn to get up above. So generally, I'd say that, let's say that we assume that we turned somewhere around halfway. Then you could say that we're probably another 20 days away from actually bottoming. So that one has actually broken down below the bull market support band. All right, let's talk about the next one, which is the short-term holders actually capitulating. What we know is that part of the cleansing process in a market, the short-term holders have to capitulate. That's pretty much what has to happen, right? So the market is designed in such a way that it flashes out weak hands every single correction, and that is the transfer of wealth every single correction from the weak hands to the strong hands, right? And in this market, in every market before the bottom, what you want is you want the short-term holders, the ones that don't really have conviction in the tokens, you want them to capitulate. So where are we in this cycle over here when it comes to short-term holder capitulation? Well, truth is we've had it. Here, look at the big short-term holder capitulation. In every correction, we've had the short-term holders capitulate at some point. And you can pretty much see this on-chain, right? So this is one of those on-chain indicators, short-term holder capitulating, short-term holder puking, bang, short-term holders have done that. So that indicator has basically bottomed. All right, so those are the indicators. And then I'm going to go to 2 or 3 other sentiment indicators. Now, these indicators you're not going to find on TradingView. You're not going to find them on CryptoQuant or whatever else, because these are some of my indicators. One of my indicators is whether people believe the bull market is over or people don't believe the bull market is over. And as you know, I've been, so let me write this down because I forgot to add it in, bull market over. And I'm looking for 2/3. So I'm looking for 2/3 of people to tell me that they believe that the bull market is actually over. And when I did the last poll on my Twitter, what you can see is that at the time, see, am I boring you, bro? At the time, or yesterday, I didn't do one today, I will do it a bit later, only 46% of people believe the bull market's over. So that one hasn't yet triggered. Like we're still not at the point where people really believe that this bull market's over. Cool, then there's 2 other indicators that I think are worth looking at to tell us whether the bull market's over or the bull market's not over. The first one is what I'm calling the James Wynn indicator, right? When James Wynn, and people like James Wynn, double down on their shorts and then take a victory lap, I think that's time to turn. Because I think what this guy showed us is that he's probably the worst trader ever to hit the world. The guy went up $100 million and managed to give it all back and managed to give more back. And what I realized is that he's doubling down on his short. I see this guy as the ultimate retail emotional investor. He calls every single trade wrong. He's better than Jim Cramer. He is now saying he's doubling down on his shorts and he's taking a victory lap. And his victory lap is by wanting to increase his monthly subscription from $99 to $169 or $229. When this guy takes a victory lap about his short, I think it's time that you can start switching long. Lastly, I call this one the Alex Becker indicator. And I must say, like, as much as Alex Becker is a degen and that, he makes amazing content. And one of the things that he does really well is every time that there's a crypto bottom, he makes that thing saying, yes, dummy, it's time to sell your crypto. Now, the question is, has Alex Becker actually made his yes, dummy it's time to sell your crypto. He made one 3 weeks ago. Okay, so that indicator has basically triggered. So now, with all of that in mind, let's quickly copy this. I don't know if you can copy it. All right, now with all of that in mind, the big question is, has this market actually bottomed? And if we look at all the indicators together, what we can see is that the chart liquidity sweep is almost done. We probably need to get a little bit lower for it to be done. The average drawdown has been hit. The sentiment is hasn't been scared for a very, very long time. The liquidity hasn't yet started to come in. The open interest dominance has still not triggered that 50%. The supply and a loss has triggered. The weekly RSI has triggered. The Bollinger bands have triggered. The bull market support band is triggering. You could say it hasn't triggered yet. The short-term holders have capitulated. The bull market over indicator hasn't yet hit. Not yet. And James Wynn is actually celebrating. So what do I conclude? I'll go back to my original thesis. And my original thesis is, it's not the end yet. And we're very, very, very close to the end. And there's going to be one more little leg down. Now, the big question is, when do I think the end will come? As I've said a million times before, I think it's coming sometime around December. I think December and January are going to be absolutely, absolutely crazy in the market. I think that the government shutdown has to end soon. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this letter yesterday from Chuck Schumer. He said, "Dear President Trump, we write to demand a bipartisan meeting of the legislative leaders to end the GOP shutdown of the federal government and decisively address the Republicans' healthcare crisis. Democrats stand ready to meet you face to face anytime, any place." At the same time, there's threats of like airplanes, air traffic being stopped. I don't know if you guys heard this. Quite scary, actually.
Anticipate there'll be additional disruptions. There'll be frustration. We are working with the airlines. They're going to work with passengers. But in the end, our sole role is to make sure that we keep this airspace as...
So the airspace around the United States is getting very, 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 very scary. Lots of flights are getting cancelled. That's becoming a real disruption to the US economy. When the government shutdown actually ends, what we do know is that the months after the government shutdown are very, 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 very bullish, right? Like usually the governments resolve a whole lot of problems in the shutdown. And then when they come out of the shutdown, they become very, 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 very bullish. And so I think the government shutdown's about to end soon. What 𝗓𝗏𝗍 said in his new thesis, he says, between now and when stealth QE begins, one has to husband capital, expect choppy markets until the government shutdown ends. The Treasury via its debt auctions is borrowing money and taking money out of circulation, but not spending it. The Treasury general account is above $850 billion. This extra liquidity won't get released into the government until the government reopens. This liquidity drain is one of the reasons for the current softness in the crypto markets. Given that the 4-year cycle anniversary of a 2021 Bitcoin all-time high is nigh, many will mistake this period of market weakness as the top to dump their stack. That's assuming they weren't deaded in the altcoin collapse a few weeks ago. That's a mistake. The dollar market, money market plumbing doesn't lie. This corner of the market is shrouded in obtuse jargon, but once you translate the lingo into print more money and destroy more money, it becomes quite easy. And so, look, I know some other hosts on Banter believe that it's the end of the bull market, namely 𝗓𝗏𝗓, because, 𝗓𝗏𝗓 believes that it's the end of the bull market. Well, I don't know if he believes it's the end of the bull market, because he was saying that he believes it's the end of the bull market, but the market may go up 20% or it may go down 20%. And then he went 30x long. I don't know. Anyway, on Sunday, 𝗓𝗏𝗓 and I are going to hold a live debate here on Banter. It's going to be at 12:30 New York time, 12:30 EST on Sunday. 𝗓𝗏𝗓 and I are putting on the gloves, and I actually want to hear what this guy has to say, because I think he's very, very, very confused. I had a call with him yesterday. He was like, bro, I think that we can go up 20% or down 20%. If we go up 20%, it's going to be a fake bounce, and then it's going to come down again. So I'm like, 𝗓𝗏𝗓, should I go long or should I go short, bro? I don't know. Anyway, on Sunday, 𝗓𝗏𝗓 is going to educate us. Cool. So that's my thesis around the bottom. That's the thesis around the bottom. Meantime, if we look at the charts, there is some good news for us. There's some good news for us in the charts. Very hard to speak about good news when the market's been so red. Zcash is about $500. Guys, I made an amazing video about Zcash yesterday. Go to this channel over here, Crypto Insider. There's a link below, by the way, if you want to go there. I made an amazing Zcash video, and I describe in this video why I think you can carry on buying Zcash all the way up to like 1,000 or even more. I do believe Zcash can go to between, I don't know, I think it can go up to 10,000, but in a couple of years. I think Zcash is the next Bitcoin, to be honest. And then ICP is up 37%. I did tell you guys the other day around ICP. To me, I think ICP has finally found product market fit. I think with the launch of Caffeine, which is, by the way, it's their, this is, remember, we played around with this. Oh, wow, look, it fixed this. So this is a AI coding app called Caffeine, which automatically deploys the apps into decentralized apps on ICP. And I literally coded this whole thing with a prompt. I said, create a price application that displays crypto prices as bubbles, make them green when they are up and red when they are down. The bigger they are, the move, the bigger the bubble. And then I gave it a few other prompts just to fix it up. I said, please stop the bubbles from bouncing around and let them move slightly and like they're floating, which I think it's done very well. You can also add the percentage move, which it's done pretty well. I mean, Josh is not going to have a job soon. And this took me all of 3 minutes. Now, if I press deploy, I can effectively deploy this live onto ICP, which means that this is the launch pad for decentralized apps on the internet, which is amazing. And that's why I think ICP is actually moving, because I think it's actually finally found some product market fit for a thing that's very complicated. Near obviously moving because of near intense, which is where all the Zcash are actually being swapped. 𝗬𝗏 is making a move. I really think 𝗬𝗏 is a fantastic buy here. I know I keep saying it, but I really think that it's 𝗬𝗏 time. And I think if you're not holding 𝗬𝗏, I think get yourself some 𝗬𝗏 now. Soon. Look at this one. Soon. Up 73%. I don't know what soon is, but I'll see you again soon. Until then, trade well, my friends.